Central Florida and folks from Atlanta and Boulder, Colorado, and wherever you are residing. I'm happy to partner with ATD Central Florida and talk about storytelling for learning. So I have a couple of questions that I'd like to ask you, and you can put your answer in the chat before we get started with the presentation. So first, how and why do you use stories in training currently? How do you use stories in training and why? Go ahead and type your answer in the chat. Yeah, make sure that when you respond in the chat that you're responding to all panelists and attendees so that we can see your answers. If you're not figuring out the chat feature, you can also just unmute yourself.
That's correct. Yeah, it's just on the drop down there, guys. And here we go. We got some responses there.
Okay, good. Jay says that he uses stories for context to provide examples. That's excellent.
That's correct. We got Kelly saying that to help ground concepts in relatable examples.
Excellent.
Yeah, Catherine telling us usually as a cautionary tale or a story of how someone made a success of a concept.
Excellent.
Made a success of a concept. It's great. Good ideas.
Cautionary tale. I like that. That's nice. Good, because that insinuates that there is some conflict involved, and you must have that for sure. And Kelly, to gain attention. Yeah, excellent. Very good. Well, I'd like to read you a couple of quotes of some professionals in the field who have something to say about stories. The first one is from Julie Dirksen. She has a book called Design for How People Learn. And I recommend this a lot to my students. And she says, we like stories. We learn a lot from stories, and we seem to have a particularly good memory for them. A well-told story can stick with us for years, even if we've only heard it once. True, true, true. So if you want your learners to remember training, tell them a story, a well-crafted story. Another reason why stories should be used in training, stories are actionable. And this quote is from Dan Heath and Chip Heath in a book called Made to Stick. Made to Stick. They say, a story is powerful because it provides context. And one of you mentioned context. I think it was Jay. Provides the context missing from abstract prose, putting knowledge into a framework that is more lifelike, more true to our day-to-day existence, more like a flight simulator. Being the audience of a story isn't so passive. After all, inside we're getting ready to act. And I really like how they relate a story to a flight simulator. A flight simulator, the pilot gets into the simulation, and all the buttons are there that would normally be there in the plane. And when they get into the plane, they are completely ready because they have gone through that simulation. And a story has a similar effect. All the neurons that are firing in the story are the same ones that need to be firing in real life. And so it makes the learner ready to act. Okay, the last one. And this is really related to the other two. I think it enables the other two, and that is emotion. And Alexander put that in there already. Provide context and invoke emotion. Yes, there must be emotion involved. And it says, this is from a blog from HBR. It says, the best way to unite an idea with an emotion is by telling a compelling story. In a story, you not only weave a lot of information into the telling, but you also arouse your listeners' emotions and energy. If you can harness imagination and the principles of a well-told story, then you get people rising to their feet, amid thunderous applause instead of yawning and ignoring you. And that's what I want to talk with you about today. How do you craft that well-told story, especially in a training environment? How do you make the story good for learning? So we're going to actually walk through a story to figure that out together. The story is called Max's Miss. And here are the characters of the story. We have Max over here on the left. Max is an instructional designer who also handles the stakeholder relationships. Alvida is the stakeholder, and she is the one coming to Max who is asking for training. Then we have Ravi, and Ravi is the subject matter expert. And over on the far right, we have the learners themselves. And these are learners who work in an electronics, assembling electronic parts. And we see Max over here on the far left is the furthest away from the learners. So he doesn't know them as well as Ravi or Alvida does. As you work your way to the right, you get closer and closer to the learners. So Ravi is going to be the ones who knows the learners the best. All right, let's begin our story. But before we begin, I need actually 2 volunteers to unmute themselves. And all you'll be doing is reading the text on the screen, but I need a Max and I need an Alvita. So if you are willing to volunteer, just type volunteer in the chat and you can be one of these characters in the story. It'll be very easy. All you have to do is read.
All right, here we go, guys. Great opportunity to get active and interact with us. Just type volunteer in the chat, and we'll go ahead and unmute yourselves, and we'll get started. All you have to do is act a couple of things out.
There. It's not scary, I promise.
And that's fine. If no one joins up, trust me, I will have to sacrifice, since I'd never like to. I never like to interact, you know. Okay, great. So we have some folks over here. Here we go. Open office here. Hey, you'll be famous, Karen. So go ahead and work with Karen. We got Karen coming in. Anybody else? We're going to allow you to talk, Karen, so now you can unmute yourself. Just say hi for us.
Hi.
There we go. And then Kelly as well. Go ahead and allow Kelly to speak. Now you can unmute yourself, Kelly.
Oh, I'm unmuted now. Thank you.
There we go.
Okay, great. So Karen, would you play the role of Alvida? And then Kelly, you'll be our Max. If you don't mind playing Max, that would be great. All right, here we go. When you see the text appear next to your character, that's when you will speak. Let's begin.
Our employees need training on proper use of social media.
Oh, okay. What's going on?
We've seen some cases of employees making the company look bad online.
How many cases?
Not sure.
Okay. Well, what's the nature of the cases?
Mainly misrepresentations. I'll let you talk with one of my subject matter experts about it. Here's the social media policy.
Oh, thanks.
Oh.
Yeah, Alvida says thanks. Awesome. Woo, Kelly and Karen.
All right, and scene. Great work, people. Through the test one.
So Alvida, he has this question and answer time with Alvida, the stakeholder. And he has a tiny bit of information. Yes, please take your bow, Karen. And then she leaves him with the social media policy, which looks like this. Okay, don't, and don't. A list of things that you should not do on social media. All right, we'll come back to this in just a minute. All right, so Kelly, Karen, which is all they will remember. Yeah. Okay, so Max, Kelly, you're gonna stay Max, and I need a volunteer to play Ravi. Can I have a volunteer for Ravi? Anybody? Anybody that is able?
Going once, going twice, and I guess I'll be Ravi then.
All right, Alexander.
Yay.
Ravi. All right, let's begin.
So what kind of training do you need?
E-learning.
Right, but what are the learning objectives?
The what?
What do you want people to do as a result of the training?
Be aware of our policy.
And that's the end of the conversation. Nice slurping on the drink there, Alexander.
Thank you. Sound effects included as well. Yep.
Okay, so Max has had these two conversations, one with the stakeholder and one with the subject matter expert, and he goes right into an authoring tool and begins to create some training based on the social media policy and these two conversations. Aren't you dying to see what the course looks like? Here is the opening slide. Kelly says, such a familiar conversation. 100% realistic, yes. That's the way it works here too. Okay, so I'm glad I'm glad that this is fairly real. All right, so here is the course, social media policy course. This is the first slide. I mean, you're just like grooving on this so far, right? It's like, cannot wait to see what happens in this course. Then we have some click and reveal. Nice, right? The 3 things that you can't do. Nice. Then, oh, we're getting fancy with the drag and drop. We got some matching, and I bet that if you read the first one there, you can't post, what would the answer be to that?
Offensive material.
Offensive material. Very good. You must be extremely bright to be able to get that, Alexander.
Thank you.
Oh, and an assessment. Excellent. So posting offensive material online is permitted by our company's social media policy. Is this true or false? Type your answer in the chat if you think you know what the answer to this is. False, might be false, true. Oh, who said true? Catherine. You're going to have to take this course all over again because you answered incorrectly on the assessment. Okay. You missed the not. Oh my goodness. How could you? Yeah, squirmy. That's a nice little adjective there. Okay, so you've taken this course, you've taken the assessment, you've passed. Awesome, congratulations. Click the X in the upper right-hand corner to receive credit for this awesome course. All right. Way to go. What is your emotional level, your emotional connection to this course so far? On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being no emotional connection, and 10, you're not even giving it a 1. Oh my goodness. Okay, so Jay, at least you give it a 1. All right. For boredom, Jay's being generous and not giving it a 0. Thanks, Jay. Appreciate that. Okay, so poor Max has a little bit of a boring course here. But before we get into the storytelling piece, he's based this course on 2 conversations, right? He's based it on a conversation with the stakeholder and with the subject matter expert. I have a feeling that while you were watching the story unfold between Max and Alvita, you were thinking, you know, why didn't he ask this question? Or why didn't he ask that question? And we can see from from the ATDI model that he jumped right from, he skipped design completely and just jumped right into development, right? Just jumped right into the authoring tool based on these two conversations and this social media policy. So let's go back to his conversation with Alvita. What are some questions that he could have asked that would have unearthed the root problem, that would have unearthed the business outcome and the ideal solution, like whether training was even the solution or not? What questions could he ask? Go ahead and give Max some advice on what questions he could have asked Alvita to unearth these things, the root problem, the business outcome, and the ideal solution. Go ahead and type your questions in the chat or unmute yourself and just ask it. What questions would you have asked that stakeholder to give you more information to design this course on?
All right, folks, go ahead and use the chat. Go ahead and let us know what some of the questions you would ask.
Okay, what is their pain point?
Yep.
Good.
What is an example of something bad that has occurred, according to Kelly?
Okay.
It tells us, do you have examples of poor usage and effects? Good questions, good questions.
Anything else?
Let's see any other questions, guys. All right, you have, okay, what is the problem? What is the problem this causes for the company? Good one, good one. Getting to the business need. What behavior you're trying to change and improve? You have examples of someone successfully using social media? Okay.
Very good. Examples, and that's like a real story there. Good.
What is the ideal situation, says Kelly?
Mm-hmm. Oh, good. What are we going to measure? Right. Nice.
It says, what are the consequences of someone doing it wrong?
Good. These are all wonderful questions, and you can keep them coming in. You can see I have on the screen here, it's a model that I created for myself. That when I go into a stakeholder meeting, I want to find out what is the business outcome, what is the root problem, and what's the ideal solution. I use this prime model as a way to organize my questions. So the first one is personal opinion, just ask them what they think the problem is. That gains a little bit of rapport with the stakeholder. Real stories, that would be case studies, like what's actually happening out there, and one of you guys mentioned that. One of you guys mentioned pain points. So what's the initial indicator? Like what brought this to your attention that this was a problem? Metrics. Do you have any metrics to show, that this is a problem? Several of you mentioned, can you share with me some examples? When you ask that question, you're probably going to get some general kind of answers rather than specific examples, but you can follow up the examples question with the real stories question to get that there. And then the last one is distractions. And these would be questions that if training might not be the answer, then these types of questions would bring up that information. Like maybe it's a work environment issue, or maybe it's a process issue that training is not going to be able to address. So if Max had asked some of the questions that you posed that he should ask, he may have come up with some information like this. Employees in one area of the company tend to post disrespectful comments on social media. So one area rather than the whole company. Comments are usually directed at peers and sometimes managers. So mostly peers, sometimes managers. So probably in your story, you're going to want to create a story that is about a peer-to-peer kind of interaction. Some reports show a decrease in production as a result of people spending time on social media. So that speaks to the business outcome. like something we can measure, right? There should actually be an increase in production as a result of the training. And then the emotional drain also slows production and distracts employees. So we see some root problems going on here. So after some, going through the information that he's gained from Alvita with these facts in addition to others, we can see that the root problem could be social media is a place for venting during work hours. The business outcome should be an increase in production. And training is an appropriate solution. There may be other solutions in addition, but we can see that that training can actually affect knowledge, skills, and attitudes. Okay, so let's look at his conversation with Ravi. And the two things that we're going to be looking for with him are, who is his audience? And so he wants to create an audience profile. Just ask some questions about who are these people to get to know them a little bit. And then what do you want them to do? What should they be doing? And that should be collected on an action list. And these should be positive verbs. You know, in the social media policy, we had a bunch of don'ts, but the action list should be actually actions, positive actions that the learner can do as a result of training. So in short, who is your audience and what do you want them to do? The subject matter expert is going to be a great resource for those two things. And if he were to ask some questions regarding those two things, he might find out that these employees tend to talk behind one another's back if they don't like something. They are afraid of direct confrontation. There are a lot of friendships in the department that extend outside of work. So you can see maybe some facts going on there. Employees tend to hang out in cliques. Employees in this department assemble electronic parts. Now we have a lot better idea just by asking some questions of the subject matter expert or managers in the area of who these people are and how we can reach them with an effective story. What they should do, and not just an effective story, but an effective learning, effective training. After having a great conversation with Ravi about, what these employees should actually do with this policy, you find out that they should respect one another online as you are expected face-to-face, report ethical concerns to your manager rather than using social media to air your concerns, and represent the company in a positive light according to our core value of mutual respect. So we see peer-to-peer. We see some directives about taking things to your manager rather than social media if you have concerns, and then representing the company in a positive light. Now he's going to take these two things, who his audience is and what they should be doing, to create a story. And these are the same two things that you're already collecting as an instructional designer anyway. So take it the next step and develop a story. And this is the story model. You want to connect story to learning, but there's some gaps. So the two elements of story that you must have: relatable characters. And you're going to get those relatable characters right out of your audience profile. Because you know who these people are now, you're going to be able to create a character they can relate to. Plus, strong conflict. And conflict is going to come straight out of your action list. You're going to put the relatable characters in conflict with the items from your action list. You may call it a task list or learning objectives or whatever, but I call it an action list because it keeps me and my stakeholders focused on the fact that people need to do something as a result of training. Relatable characters plus strong conflict equals this wonderful thing called a desire for resolution. And once you have your audience, your learners, desiring resolution, you have them exactly where you want them. And there's still the gap between the story and learning, but this is where your training comes in. And that completes the circle between story and learning, the connection between story and learning. I'll go back to that so you can just see that for a little bit longer. To connect stories to learning, but relatable characters plus strong conflict, which creates a desire for resolution in your learner, train them, and boom, you've connected the story straight to the learning. So Max does this. He takes his audience profile, he takes his action list, and look at him. He's actually using a pencil. He's designing something. He's designing a story that his audience will be able to relate to and take action on. It's going to be a story that's memorable. It's going to be a story that is actionable. It's going to be a story that has an emotional, some emotion in it as well, connects to them emotionally. And remember, the three things that he is connecting to from the action list are: respect one another online as you are expected to face-to-face, report ethical concerns to your manager rather than using social media to air your concerns, and represent the company in a positive light according to our core value of mutual respect. Okay, so you should see these actions, you should actually see conflict with these actions within the story. Would you like to see a story?
All right.
Yay. You have a desire for resolution. So let's go to the story. This is the opening slide. It only takes a spark. A little more engaging than the opening slide of the other course, which said it's a policy course, right? So this one also has characters. So if I could have volunteers again, that would be great. To be the voices of these new characters that Max has created. And they're a little bit crude in their, not in their language, but in their appearance. They're not polished looking characters. That's okay. Max is new to this. He's just doing what he can. So do we have any volunteers? Noisy construction. Okay, that's all right.
What kind of characters we need here?
This is just a guy and a girl, but it doesn't matter.
Okay. Two characters. Who's coming in? Who wants to take a shot?
And you can be a repeat volunteer. It's okay. We have a smaller audience today, so.
Here we go. Catherine. See if we can hear Catherine. All right. Kelly is going to step in. That's great.
All right. So, Catherine, can we hear you?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Hello?
We have some feedback there. We have some feedback. Can you hear it now?
Oh, sorry.
There you go. What's your speaker on that? Catherine's probably what's happening. The mic is picking up the speaker and the speaker is picking up the mic.
Let me try.
All right. Okay. So we got Kelly as a character. Catherine is trying to come back in real quick. We'll give her a few seconds.
It's your chance, Catherine.
You're
for an
Can you
Oscar.
hear me now?
Yeah. Okay. Give it a try.
All right, here we go. So I'm going to have Catherine, you're going to read this little guy over here on the right. And then Kelly, you'll read the role of Mel. All right, so let's begin.
How's work today, Mel?
I've just had it with Kevin.
Why?
We're trying to reach our production numbers and he's always on the phone.
What? I wouldn't let that slide. You should say something.
I did. Check it out.
And here is her post online on Faceless Book. Thanks a lot, Kevin, for making work at Electronic Solutions miserable.
Ha ha.
Whoa, I guess that will show him.
Okay, and then we have another scene, and this is between Kevin and another coworker. She says, Kevin, did you see Mel's faceless book post about you? And he said, what? Very good, guys. Thank you so much. You're wonderful actors.
Again, great thespians.
Okay, so now rate your emotional level, your emotional connection to this story between 1 and 10. And just type your answer in the chat. 1 is no emotion, 10 is I am stoked. Okay, so Catherine, 8. That's a pretty high emotional level there. Ooh, lots of 8s. Way to go, Max. That's awesome. Anybody else? 7, okay. Significantly higher simply because there's a story connected here. Did you see from the description of who this audience was, did you see a representation of who these people are, afraid of direct confrontation? Did you see them reflected in the characters themselves? Talking behind one another's back, lots of friendships, tend to hang out in cliques. You know, you should see a reflection here of who these characters are in who the audience is. Not a direct mirror, but, you know, very similar. And did you see them in conflict with the actions from the action list? Respecting one another online, reporting ethical concerns to a manager rather than using social media, representing the company in a positive light, right? So you see Mel in conflict with all of these actions from the action list. So we have a relatable character who's Mel, and you have her in conflict with the items from the action list. Hope that makes sense. And so then we have this nice connection. Now, we haven't seen yet training. Where does training come in all of this? So let's look at that next. So Max follows up his story with some slides like this. How would you feel if you were Kevin? Check all that apply. And you can answer these if you'd like in the chat. How would you feel if you were Kevin? Okay, all of them. Embarrassed? Sure. What else? All? Angry, embarrassed, blamed, misunderstood. Good, so he's giving you a moment of reflection here so that you can acknowledge the emotional connection that you are having with the story. Good. What about this? Kevin is probably feeling several different emotions as a result of Mel's post. How could Mel have handled this differently? And it gives you 3 different choices. Ignore Kevin's behavior, talk to her coworkers about Kevin instead of posting, or spoken to her manager about Kevin's behavior. And you can see, you feel free to post any of the answers that you would like to put there. The point is this, number 3, yeah, and I would say that's true because we know from the action list that that's true, right? This is how this company wants that to be handled. And so you can see here a link to a socially smart guide. And so we're not asking them to memorize anything. We're actually asking them to use the socially smart guide here, and we're also asking them to use it at work so that they can consult this guide when they have a similar situation. And on that guide, it will show clearly, you should speak to your manager about this. Make sense? Then we have this slide. Mel should have spoken to her manager about Kevin's behavior. So this is the feedback slide. And this is an example of what she could say to him. I'm not sure what's going on with Kevin, but he's been on his phone a lot today. It's affecting production. And we can show these 2 approaches, approaching the manager and the faceless book post. Which one shows respect? Obviously, it's going to be this one. And so let's look at the characteristics of this respectful approach. So she doesn't assume she knows why. that Kevin is doing this. She states the facts, and how it affects work. And lastly, she talks to the right person. Okay, so this is training. This is showing them, yeah, a nice breakdown of why this statement and why this action that Mel's performing here is actually a really great solution. Now let's contrast that with Mel's conversation with her manager with the post that she made on Faceless Book post, on Faceless Book. So we have showing disrespect towards a coworker on social media. She makes electronic solutions look bad and reports a concern online instead of speaking to a manager. So these are the three things then that are in conflict with the actions from our action list. So let's just summarize the guidance that he provides after the story. You'll notice that the story doesn't stop, right? It continues into the training. And I would really encourage you, when you've got that story, and because that's why I almost always start with the story, with designing the story first, before I design the instruction. I go through the design piece first, for instructional design and story design at the same time, but then I develop that story so I know where to go with the instruction. So he gives a chance for reflection after the story in the training. Then he gives real choices and real world guidance. That's important. Then he has immediate feedback, an example, and the story keeps going. We see how things could have turned out if she had done things according to the action list. Then we see an example versus a non-example. Non-examples are great for defining what you want people to do. Then training using the example and training using the non-example. So these are some options for you as you get into the training piece of fleshing out that story. These are some options for you in the training itself. And this is through e-learning. When you're in person with people, that the options vastly increase because you can have people right there in front of you. You can be responding to the story and so forth, like we've been doing today on this virtual encounter, this digital encounter. You've given me some feedback. You've showed me some questions that should be used. You've given me your input on the emotional level of things. You've given me your input on how you use stories in training, and all of that can be done in a live setting, whereas in e-learning it's a bit harder, but these are some great options for you in e-learning. So we have on our left, the 3 things you can't do about social media, the first course, and on the right, we have story design. And all of this came from relatable characters and strong conflict, produced a desire for resolution, you put in your training, and you've connected the story to learning. So I want to stop here just a moment and ask, what kind of questions do you have regarding the story design model, regarding instructional design? What kind of questions were brought up for you as you experienced the story yourself, and any other things related to story design or instructional design? Do you have any questions? Just type those in the chat or unmute yourself and let us know. Give you a moment to type.
All right, yeah, let's go ahead and use your chat and bring in any questions you may have at this point for Rance regarding the presentation and the topics. This is your one opportunity to have a one-on-one.
Okay, that's a great question. Which applications do you like to develop storytelling? So, Brina, that really opens up the development side. We've looked a lot today about analysis and design, and we've looked at how a story could be developed right here in PowerPoint. And sometimes PowerPoint is all that you need. Sometimes just telling the story yourself in person is all that you need. I like to use PowerPoint a lot because it has a lot of flexibility. But of course, if you're doing e-learning, you can develop stories right there in the authoring tool, whether it's Articulate Storyline or Captivate. I like to use an animation tool called Beyond. It used to be called Go Animate. Now it's called Beyond. And I create a lot of stories through that tool as well. It has like whiteboard options, and it also has more, it's called Business, but it more cartoon looking characters. But that's kind of my go-tos, either Beyond or PowerPoint. And you can create things in both of those tools that can be put into any kind of situation, whether you're training people virtually and you just need an MP4, or in person, or whether you're putting it right into the e-learning course. I also have some examples that I'm going to be in Orlando at the Learning Solutions Conference. And in the breakout session, I'm actually going to be showing a lot of examples. And one of them is an audio example, more like radio drama type story.
Good, good. So we have a question from Jade. Rance says, if I have a long action list, is it better to have a more in-depth story or to break it out into several stories?
That is an awesome question, Jay. A lot of times you will have long action lists, especially if you're doing something like compliance training or safety training or something like that. And you'll be surprised by how quickly you can cover all of the actions in that list in the story. Stories are pretty efficient when it comes to covering a lot of territory in a short amount of time. So I would say if you have a longer action list, yeah, probably break it up. It might make sense to break it up per character, and different characters are in conflict with different actions on that list. It may be more logical to do it via topic, so that's how I do it sometimes when I design compliance training. I'll have, like a privacy story. I'll have an information security story. I'll have a compliance story. And that will kind of open up each of those sections, and it'll play out throughout that section of the course.
Awesome. So we have another question here from Kelly. It says, love this framework that you presented. Do you run into any common resistance to having the training revolve around the story?
Yeah, that is a great question, Kelly. I have a blog that I wrote about this because it is pretty common. If you go to needastory.com, there is a blog that I wrote called, I'll look it up in just a second.
Don't worry, I'll get that.
Yeah. So, but yes, you will find resistance to storytelling, particularly if it's from an organization that is a bit more conservative. I certainly ran into that, and it just took time to gain trust and to show them that it just took time to show them that stories actually did make a difference. And so in my blog, if you go to that link that he put up there, that Alexander put up there, then you'll see a particular post that addresses that. And I'm forgetting the name of it, but if anyone else has a question, go ahead and put it in.
Yeah. Sounds good. All right, guys, we got about 5 minutes. Please enter any other questions that you have. so we can we'll get wrapped up here. In the meantime, I'd like to thank Rance for the amazing presentation, great thoughts and good ideas that he had brought up here. Go ahead and come on deck again. Hello. Great stuff. As you know, he's going to be here in Orlando, Learning Solutions Conference. And as I said, you can go ahead and try to, if you're not attending, just grab the Expo Pass and hang out with us over there at Alaskan, and we'll get a chance to probably meet him in person. We'll catch him around.
Alexander, I did want to mention that I'm doing a workshop, a full day workshop. It's a pre-conference workshop to Learning Solutions. So if you're going to be, or if you're already in Orlando and you want to attend the pre-conference workshop to take a deep dive into story design, I will be there. Otherwise, you're more than welcome to reach out to me directly. And the name of the blog post is Building a Case for Stories and Learning. So go to that link and look at Building a Case for Stories and Learning. It'll give you a lot of ammo for your hesitant stakeholders.
Great stuff. If you didn't catch the YouTube episode of Off the Cuff with me and Rance, go ahead and you can get that link there. I want to thank Rance for joining us on this. I want to thank each of you to joining. I want to let you know as well that this the recording of this presentation will be available in a new page we're going to make available to all members. So if you are an ATDCFL member, there will be a new page only for members that will have a curated concentration of the webinars that all of us are doing, that we're doing here for the chapter, and some of those that I'm doing, for example, for other chapters. So that's coming up, and that's something that will be hopefully resourceful and helpful for you. I'd like to thank you, Rance, for the story and sharing your expertise today with us. It's highly appreciated.
Thank you too, Alexander. It was great spending some time with you guys today. Have a wonderful day.
I want to ask everybody else if you can join in the chat here. We're getting a lot of great responses. Thanking you for joining us, and let us know if this is the best time to do a webinar. If you'd like to do it at lunch, or we should do it in the evenings, that would be also very helpful. Take a chance now. Leave your thoughts. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Rance. And that is it for now. We're signing off, and we'll see you on the next one, guys, next month.